Let me record. So I want us to revise something on decision making. So I'll be able to do a summary here. Then, of course, I'll be able to go through some questions that have been tested in the past, some few questions that have been tested in the past. So decision making is one of the topics, I think topic number 7 in leadership and management. So when you talk about decision making, it is having to do what select a course of action among multiple alternatives to achieve a desired outcome in an organization. So it basically involves having to support what we call planning in an organization. In this case, you are given a different kind of alternatives. You can go to choose the most appropriate alternative by having to be able to do make the most appropriate decision. So when you're having course of actions to be able to, for example, resolve matters or resolve problems in an organization, we'll be able to say you are doing what? You are making a decision. You're having to do make a decision to come up with the most appropriate action that you can be able to undertake to do to resolve problems, or maybe in this case, for example, to plan for the future ahead. So this decision making, basically, it supports what we call the planning in an organization, planning in an organization. So we can be able to have different types of decisions having to be made. For example, in an organization, there can those decisions that can actually basically be programmed. So these are basically decisions following set procedures, or maybe in this case, following set rules and regulations within the organization. So they are programmed decisions. So they basically arise from what? They arise from the rules and regulations, or maybe procedures set within the organization. Non-programs, these are very complex. You cannot be able to set procedures or maybe rules for them, or how you can be able to go about them. So they are non-programmed. So they are complex, non-routine in nature. You can't be able to set, for example, now in this case, what you are calling programs for them. So you have to basically, in this case, maybe face them as they actually arise within the organization. Operational, these are basically decisions involving day-to-day activities. They are usually, these kind of decisions are mostly basically undertaken by the persons you are calling supervisors in the organization. So they basically supervise or guide employees on a day-to-day basis. So they basically support in what you're calling operational activities. So they'll basically, in this case, for example, support the employees on how they can be able to go about their tasks on a day-to-day basis. So they are operational kind of decisions. They basically support daily operations of the organizations. Strategic. So these are basically decisions made at the topmost level of the organization, at the board of directors level. So you can be able to say those decisions that are basically made there, they are called strategic decisions. They are majorly long-term in nature. So these people basically sit on the board of directors, the directors, they basically oversee or basically think about the organization probably maybe like in the next 5 years, where will it be? And of course, now in this case, they set out plans as to how maybe in this case, those particular goals can be achieved within 5 years. So maybe they want to expand. So they are looking at which scale of expansion within the next 5 years. So they have to put in place maybe plans. So these plans basically will need to, for example, make certain decisions in terms of, for example, maybe to improve the human resource. So those decisions made at the topmost level of the organization, at the board of directors level, we can be able to say these are what you're calling strategic decisions. They are majorly long-term in nature. Tactical decisions, these are now in this case, for example, made by the middle level management. So the middle level management, they are basically supporting the employees down there. So they'll be able to come up with some kind of strategies to support or maybe implement the daily activities within the organization. So we can be able to call them tactical decisions. So those are some of the decisions, major decisions that can actually be made in an organization. So of course, you can be able to have other decisions, not so much related to the organization, but of course, sometimes, or maybe they can be able to creep in within an organization. We can be able to say, we can have what we call political decisions. So they involve using power, influence, negotiation to achieve a desired outcome. So political, I don't know if still basically applies to an organization. So people will say that in an organization, we still have what we are calling politics. So are there usually politics in an organization? So it is for you to decide or maybe judge for yourself. Are there usually politics in an organization? So political decisions, they are basically involving use of power, influence, negotiation to achieve a desired outcome. Personal, these are basically made at the personal level. So maybe you want to do maybe plan for your finances. You decide upon as to how you use your money. For example, if you are being paid 100,000, you can be able to decide maybe you are going to, in this case, take a holiday, spend 50,000. So those are basically decisions dependent upon the personal life of an individual at a personal level. So you can be able to call them personal decisions. I can be able to say Shiko says yes. Yes, in an organization we have what you are calling what politics. So if there are politics, then you need to find a way you can be able to manage these politics. So you have to manage them. You can't run away from them. You have to do what? Manage them. Manage these politics in an organization. So those are some of the decisions that can actually be made in an organization. So we can have programmed, we can have non-programmed, we can have operational, strategic, tactical. Sometimes we can be able to have political, or sometimes we can be able to have other decisions at a personal level of an individual. We call them what? Personal decisions, personal decisions. So the decision-making process. So since you are saying that this particular decision-making basically supports planning. So how can you be able to come up with the most effective decisions within an organization? Number one, before you make a decision, or maybe in this case, decide upon you've been able to make a decision, you'll be able to, for example, diagnose or identify a problem at hand. So first of all, diagnose, maybe identify a problem at hand. So which problem are you basically facing? So first of all, define first of all the problem that you're basically having at hand. So what is the problem? For example, now in this case, in this organization, maybe you're having high staff turnover. We're having high staff turnover. Or probably now in this case, in this organization, we are having low productivity from the employees. Or maybe in this case, the outcomes out of the productivity are not actually basically meeting our targets, maybe at the end of the month. So that is the problem that you're basically having at hand. You need to do what? Resolve the problem by having to do what? Maybe make a decision. So first of all, identify the problem at hand. Number two, look for alternatives of solutions of this particular problem. You are saying you are having a high staff turnover. So what are the solutions that you can be able to have on the table? So in this case, you have to identify so many alternative solutions. Then you choose maybe one amongst them. So, for example, now in this case, if there is low productivity, what could be the reason? Maybe the number of employees are actually very few. You need to maybe in this case add the employees. Or maybe in this case, you need to, for example, maybe increase time that is actually basically undertaken by the employees to do what? To produce the products within the organization. So you need to generate what you are calling what? Alternative solutions, many of them. Then, of course, now in this case, you can maybe choose one amongst those ones. So you need to consider the problem to be addressed. And of course, now in this case, generate solutions or alternatives. You can be able to, for example, now in this case, consult or ask people basically maybe are actually experts in that particular area, or maybe consult your fellow colleagues or maybe managers to be able to, for example, come up with different kind of alternatives. So after you've been able to do this, then you do what? You gather information about these alternatives. This is where we are saying now in this case, for example, you consult. These alternatives that you basically have at hand, consult about them, try to understand them. How effective can they actually basically work? What are some of the pros and actually basically cons of each and every alternative? Look at what are the advantages, disadvantages. If you take this particular alternative, what could be the advantage? So you are gathering information. If I take this other one, what could be the disadvantage? So having to, for example, identify disadvantages and advantages of each and every alternative, so that in this case, you can be able to do what? Weigh and actually basically identify the most appropriate alternative to do what? To resolve your problem at hand. So analyze and actually do what? Evaluate the alternatives. As you're saying, you basically do what? Try to weigh the advantages and disadvantages. In this case, you're looking at what? For example, the cost-benefit analysis. So what are the costs that are basically involved in, for example, to implement this particular decision? Having to increase or maybe get more employees. What is the cost that will likely be incurred? What could be the benefit arising out of having to get more employees? So the marginal analysis of products with higher marginal contributions considered in what? Priority. If it is concerning productivity, look at, for example, what is the benefits arising out of having to maybe produce this particular kind of products if you compare the different kind of products you have at hand. So you can be able to use what we call decision trees. Then decide and select the most preferred alternative. So you've been able to evaluate these alternatives. Now choose the most appropriate one. Select the preferred solution or alternative. You've chosen that you're going to do what? Not going to increase time taken to produce products, but you're going to do what? Employ more employees. So you've already decided. So in this case, you do what? You decide upon the preferred solution. Then you do what? You implement that particular solution. How do you implement? For example, now in this case, if it is involving to get more employees, you have to do what you are calling what? Recruitment. You have to recruit the employees. So you have to follow the right processes of having to recruit employees. Maybe you'll be able to advertise, you recruit them. After having recruited them, you take them into the organization, you train them. After having been able to train them, you orient and actually train them. So in this case, you give them the tasks that they're supposed to be able to undertake. After that, maybe in this case, what do you do? Maybe you try to do what you are calling performance evaluation. Try to evaluate whether in this case they are performing optimally. They are able to meet the targets. So after you've been able to, for example, now in this case, come up with the preferred solution, you need to evaluate the outcomes. After you increase your employees, did the productivity of the products actually go up? Did you actually meet the target for the month? So that is having to do what evaluate the outcomes of the decisions you've been able to take. That is the procedure or process having to do what make a decision within an organization. So this decision making can end up having to come up with several challenges. It's not a smooth process. It is a very tedious process. So it can basically lead to you having to face what you're calling what several challenges. So there can be several challenges that you might end up having to face when you're having to do what make a decision within an organization. For example, there are several challenges that can actually basically arise in decision-making process. For example, there could be what you're calling what biasness. So you can end up having to be biased. So then, of course, having to manage what you're calling what emotions, making decisions with what you're calling what emotions. So fear, anger, and what you're calling what anxiety. Then dealing with the limited information. For example, if you don't get enough information, for example, in this case, to support the alternatives that you're having at hand, then you might end up not having to be able to make the most appropriate decision. So lack of information or lack of, in this case, know-how, maybe skills as well, maybe you can be able to implement some of the decisions. Balancing risks and benefits, sometimes to balance what are the benefits and risks or disadvantages of an alternative might not actually be very easy. So decisions often involve trade-offs, and it can be challenging to weigh the potential risks and actually what benefits. So if you look at these other one, the benefits are basically so good. These other one, the benefits are so good. So trying to balance and basically choose which alternative is actually the most appropriate can sometimes be a bit difficult. Addressing conflicting goals. So different individuals or departments may have conflicting goals, making it difficult to reach a mutual acceptable decision, whereby in this case, the objectives that are having to be achieved out of the decision are not actually common. So these are basically looking at that particular decision or solution to resolve a particular goal. These are the ones that are looking at it to having to resolve another goal. So whereby the goals are not actually basically in this case mutual or maybe concurrent from different departments, then it can end up having to make a decision making become very difficult. So you are basically faced with difficult situations from different departments. They are not actually basically working to same or similar goal or having to achieve a similar objective by the decisions that are supposed to be undertaking. So the perception taken out of the decision that is actually made is actually very different, taken differently by different departments. Making difficult choices, you'll be able to make difficult choices. You have to make difficult choices when you're making decisions. So some of them, you might end up having they might end up even having to disadvantage you as an individual, maybe as a manager. But still, in this case, you have to do what make those particular decisions. Sometimes it is a bit difficult to do what implement some decisions. So it comes with maybe costs, comes with the costs, people having to adapt to maybe in this case, change out of the decision might not actually be very easy. So you have to, for example, change the culture of the people to basically in this case, do what maybe implement a decision. So you can end up having to do what face difficulties in having to implement a decision dependent upon several factors or maybe circumstances at hand that are basically maybe within the organization. So those are part of the challenges you might end up having to do at first when you're having to do what make a decision within an organization. So that is basically just a summary of this particular topic that you've already been able to learn known as decision making. So I want us to look at some sampled questions from the past papers. So you can be able to start with this one. State 4 challenges associated with the group decision making. So whereby you make a decision within a group. So you have to, for example, meet, and of course now in this case, make what? A decision. So it leads to what we call what? Groupthink. So it is where group members conform to dominant opinions. So sometimes in this case, when you're making decisions within a group, there are those members who are usually very dominant. So they'll talk a lot or basically make a lot of contributions. But there are those ones, in this case, they are just quiet. So they basically follow what the others have been able to say. So you always have those particular kind of characters when you're basically having to make a decision in a group. There are those ones who are so dominant. So they want to really make sure that their points have actually been heard. They want, in this case, for example, to really push their way of thinking to be decided as what has been decided as a group. So groupthink in this case can end up having to make other people not to be able to do what, contribute effectively to process of having to make a decision. So it is where group members conform to dominant opinions. So whereby those who are very dominant will be able to provide opinions And of course, though, in this case, there could be those who are dissenting, but they're not actually basically having to do what air their view. There's what we call social loafing. It is where some group members may not contribute fully to decision making, which can result in the group missing out on the important ideas or perspectives. Group polarization. It is where group members tend to become more extreme in their positions after discussing them with others in the group, which can lead to more extreme decision-making outcomes. So they basically go to the extreme of having to do what? Defend their position. Then we have decision paralysis. It is where groups become stuck in the decision-making process and are unable to reach a decision due to conflicting opinions. So you'll always just be discussing, rotating. So you don't end up having to even make a decision. So it becomes even very difficult. So that's what they say in this case, having to make decisions as an individual, sometimes it is a bit easy. We call it what? Easy decision making, if it is made by an individual rather than a group. So in a group, in this case, you'll always get conflicting contributions or conflicting interests of different parties. So you might basically be stuck having to just discuss similar and the same thing. It might take even a very long period of time. You might end up having to complete the meeting of having to decide upon a decision and you not come up with a solution. So it can lead to what we call decision paralysis. So at the end of the day, if you're not actually careful, as maybe the leader in that particular case, you might end up not having even to be able to make a decision. Then August 2022, question number 3, they explain decision making. So it is a thought process of selecting logical choice from available options. When trying to make a good decision, a person must weigh the positives and negatives of each option and consider all alternatives. So it's whereby you basically make a choice out of alternatives that have basically been given to you, so that in this case, you can basically, in this case, resolve a particular matter or maybe problem within an organization. Steps of decision making, so we've just been able to look at them. So they're actually up here. They're actually up here that we've just been able to look at them. So you're saying identify or define the problem, generate solutions or alternatives to solutions, gather information about these solutions, then analyze and evaluate the alternatives, each one of them, decide and actually select the preferred solution, then implement the preferred solution. Then you do what? You monitor and actually evaluate that particular solution we've been able to decide upon. So evaluation of the outcomes out of the solutions that have been decided or decisions that have actually been made. So that is also a common question you can be able to come across, decision-making process. We have this one, examine 6 distinguishing characteristics between strategic decisions and tactical decisions. So saying strategic decisions basically will mostly be made at the top most level of the organization, at the board of directors level. So when you talk about strategic, they are basically made at the top level management. Tactical, mostly they actually happen at the middle level management or middle level management. So strategic decisions are those decisions that are concerned with the setting of long-term objectives, the acquisition of, for example, sustainable competition advantage, and the formulation of evaluation, selection, and monitoring of strategies to achieve these objectives. So strategic decisions are made by top managers, usually directors in an organization. What about tactical? They are concerned with how strategic level objectives are to be met and how strategies are to be implemented. So in this case, decisions that are basically made at the middle level, they are all about decisions involving as to how these top level management decisions or strategies are going to do what? To be implemented. They're going to be implemented. So they are dependent upon overall strategy and involve fine-tuning and adjustment. So you'll be able to fine-tune what has been agreed upon at the top level. And of course, now in this case, do what? Implement as a middle level management. So the distinguishing characteristics between strategic and tactical decisions include, for example, importance. Strategic decisions are significantly more important than what? Tactical decisions. Level at which they are conducted. Strategic decisions are made at the top level management, topmost level management, while in this case, you are saying tactical, they are made where? At the middle level management. Time horizon, strategic, they are basically long-term in nature. They are long-term in nature. You know, these persons who basically sit at the top level management. They are, for example, setting the vision and the mission of the organization. Like in the next 5 years, we should be the leading organization in East and Central Africa. So those are kind of decisions that they're having to be able to make. Now they basically cascade these decisions down to the middle level. So the middle level has to break it down. We are saying you want to, for example, now in this case, for example, achieve this level whereby you're supposed to be the leading company or organization in East and Central Africa in the next 5 years. What are we supposed to do, for example, on a daily basis? What are we supposed to, for example, now in this case, achieve on a monthly basis? By the end of the first year, what should we have achieved? That is basically now having to be broken down by the middle level. So they are making the tactical decisions. So for example, now in this case, do what? Implement what has been decided upon at the top level management. So the time horizon is actually short-term in nature for tactical decisions. The formulation of strategic decisions is continuous and irregular, while tactical decisions are periodic and have a fixed time. Strategic decisions require large amounts of external information. So before you make a strategic decision as the top level management, you have to do what you're calling at consultation and even seek expertise advice. So you don't just decide that you're going to be, for example, the leading company in East and Central Africa in the next 5 years. So they have to do what we call what? Consultation. So that's why in this case, those who basically sit at the top level management are usually people or basically experts who are maybe serving on other companies' board of directors, so that they bring in some kind of expertise. When these kind of strategies are having to be made or formulated, they can maybe be able to make a contribution. And of course, the organization can be able to come up with what you're calling what? Reasonable strategic decisions. So in this case, you have to seek, when you're having to make strategic decisions as the board of directors level, you have to seek expertise or maybe advice from experts from outside. So decisions that require what? Large amounts of external information. You have to do a lot of research and actually find out what is basically happening outside. And of course, look at the future, basically what is likely to happen in the future. Ease of evaluation, strategic decisions are much more difficult to make than tactical. So strategic are very difficult to make compared to what you're calling what? Tactical. Because in this case, tactical is just simply dependent upon what has already been agreed upon. So you need to just break it down. But of course, now in this case, strategic, so they are unique, they are by themselves. They don't actually basically rely on others. So in this case, they are being made independently to see where the organization will be, for example, in the next number of years. So they are basically very difficult to be able to formulate and maybe come up with compared to what you are calling what? Tactical decisions. Then the next one, discuss 6 steps that guide the strategic decision-making process. So 6 steps that guide decision-making process in our organization. I think we've been able to look at that one already, so there's no need of having to repeat again. So then this one, identify and explain the steps of decision-making. So we've already been able to look at this one. So you can be able to see it is a very common question, a decision-making process, very common. Then this one, describe the decision support systems available to managers when making decisions. So we can be able to have systems, computerized systems that can be able to assist the managers to do what? Make decisions. So decision support systems, what are they? Decision support systems may be defined as interactive computer-based systems which help decision makers utilize data and models to solve unstructured problems. So here, basically, in this case, it simply means you can be able to use, for example, a displayed or interactive data on a computer for you as a manager to be able to do what? Make a decision. So decision support system integrates the intellectual resources of individuals with the capabilities of the computer to improve quality of decisions. So for example, now in this case, we are looking at different kinds of perspectives in terms of, for example, maybe productivity. So you can be able to look at, for example, some of the trends that have been displayed, for example, in the last maybe few years, maybe number of months, to decide upon, for example, which kind of levels you can be able to achieve maybe the next or coming month. And of course, now in this case, you can be able to, for example, match this particular kind of maybe output or maybe outcomes dependent upon the resources that are actually deployed. So there can be those tools, for example, in the computer that can be able to, for example, match such kind of aspects or maybe perspectives, and of course, help you as a manager to do what? Make a decision. If I'm to achieve, for example, this level of output, maybe in the number of coming month, if I do comparison of what has been able to happen on the trends or maybe previously, I can be able to see this what has actually been happening. So they are basically computer tools that can be able to do what? Assist you by having what you're calling what? Interactive computer-based system that can be able to assist you by having what you're calling what? Displays on the computer that can be able to assist you, just having a look at them and do what? Decide upon or maybe make a decision. So they may be seen as interactive, flexible, and adaptable computer-based information systems that utilize decision rules and models, comprehensive database. So there's data that is actually involved, and decision makers' own insights. They support complex decision making and increases its effectiveness. So in this case, these DSSs can include, for example, linear programming models, queuing models, simulation models, transshipment or transportation models, or assignment models. So that is what you learn in QA. So benefits of decision support systems. what is the benefit of having to use, for example, these computer-based systems in terms of having to do what? Make decisions. So cost saving. So they eliminate costs associated with what? Wrong decisions. So you are likely to make effective decisions if you do what? Deploy these DSS. So you make effective decisions. So you won't incur the cost of having to make wrong decisions. Then facilitates communication and stakeholder engagement. You are seeing they're interactive. So they're interactive, and of course, now in this case, you'll be able to engage different kind of parties, especially maybe at having to maybe engage data, or maybe having to do what? Get the data, or maybe having to do what? Maybe communicate the data that is actually basically at hand. So it enables what you're calling what? Communication amongst managers, whereby they can be able to share information through the computerized systems to the other persons who can actually be able to do what? Maybe see what is actually happening in the other area or maybe another department. New insights and actually learning. DSS have the ability to quickly and objectively generate different strategies under different situations. The users are exposed into new insights through sensitivity analysis, and therefore an agency of training and inexperienced managers can actually basically be trained. Ability to support solution of complex problems. So they can enable solving very complex problems. So improved managerial effectiveness, it makes managers become very effective. They don't waste a lot of time in terms of having to do what? Maybe make decisions, because the data is already there. It is basically having to be supported through the systems to make what? Or come up with what you're calling what? Decisions. So it makes them become very effective, very efficient. And of course, now in this case, they'll be able to save time in terms of having to do what? Maybe make decisions. So decision making becomes a bit faster. Graphical displays. DSS provide graphical displays of information needed by managers, and therefore help managers view, analyze, and understand data. When you use these DSS, you can be able to understand the data very fast. So out of the data, you do what? You make a decision, maybe decide upon what you're going to be able to do by maybe being able to use graphical presentations. You can use other kind of presentations, for example, in Excel. So it can be able to tell you some kind of trends that are actually basically happening in terms of maybe different perspectives concerning the organization. And therefore, you'll be able to make a decision very fast as a manager. So it makes you become very effective, and the decision making becomes very easy in the organization. So that is part of what can basically be supported by what you're calling what? Decision support systems, which are basically computer-based systems that support in decision making within an organization. So that is basically what we intended to revise for today. We are basically revising the topic of decision making. Decision making, one of the topics under leadership and management. So I don't have anything else to be able to add on that. So I'll be able to share this particular handout. You can be able to do personal revision or personal studies. For those who are already in the discussion group, those who are already in the classes, you can be able to use it for your personal revision, So for those who haven't been able to join our classes, as I'm told, this particular session was actually basically free, coming to you courtesy of RCM Online College. You can be able to reach out to us, and of course, you can be able to enjoy such sessions concerning revision for different kind of subjects, all the units in CPA. So I don't know if there's any question or any concern up to that particular point, because I would wish to end there. So I don't know if the lesson has been helpful to you. Has it been helpful to you? You can give feedback. You can post a question. You can raise a concern. I'll be able to see there on the chat. Alternatively, you can be able to raise your hand. We will unmute you, and of course, you can be able to maybe speak to us or tell us any question you have, any contribution you would like to make. I can see some feedback here from Shiku, very well articulated. Any question? So if you haven't been able to join our sessions for revision, you can reach out to this number. This number will come in handy in having to assist you a lot to get attached to RCM Online College resources. Those numbers will come in handy. Those ones that have been able to live there will come in handy. To be able to assist you to do what? To join the classes, especially the revision classes. Anyone who has a question? Before we could end this particular session? So I can see Kat. I don't know, you're saying, how do you answer question one? I don't know which question one do you mean. because all the questions we've been able to discuss here, we've been able to display the answers. I don't know which specific question you are referring to. I don't know which specific question you are referring to. Or case study, you're asking about the case study. So I think we'll be able to revise case study questions, but I think we'll do them as the last question, as the last thing that we'll be able to cover under the revision, case study questions. So we can be able to cover these topics first of all, then we cover the case study questions as the last thing. So what you need to be able to do about a case study, you need to be able to, for example, read through that particular case study, because there's basically be an explanation. Then, of course, you have to relate that particular case study from a specific area of concern in leadership and management. So maybe in this case, the case study is basically referring to maybe theories of management. So you need to have like a background knowledge of what basically is normally applied concerning theories of management. Maybe in this case, it is concerning what? Maybe staffing in the organization. So you need to, for example, have like a background knowledge or information concerning how staffing normally happens in an organization. So first of all is to do what? Be able to understand and maybe interpret the case that is basically that is being tested, from which specific area under leadership or management have they basically focused on. Probably it could be touching on different areas in leadership and management. So if in this case, you have like full knowledge or an understanding of basically what is normally studied or learned in leadership and management, then if you can be able to identify and connect that particular case study to the specific area that has been tested, then, and of course, you have the background knowledge or information as to how, in this case, what normally happens in that particular area. For example, if it is decision making, maybe it is a case study concerning how decisions are normally made in an organization. So maybe someone has been able to come up with that decision. But of course, the procedure or process has been able to use is not what is basically recommended under management. So of course, now in this case, you know the process of having to do what? Make a decision. So you can be able to now apply and basically in this case, now look at the questions that are being tested under that particular case study. So having to connect what has been described in the case itself, and basically in this case, what basically you've been able to study in leadership and management, which specific area? Is it on functions of management? Is it, of course, for example, now in this case, what you're calling maybe theories of management? Is it concerning maybe introduction to management? Is it decision making? Is it environmental analysis? You need to understand something about environmental analysis. Then once you can be able to link the two, then now recollect the information you have, for example, the knowledge you have about, for example, environmental analysis. This is what normally happens in environmental analysis. So any question that is basically to be tested, basically it will be concerning maybe that particular area, and of course you can be able to do what? Maybe address it. So I think we'll be able to look at some case study questions. So it will be part of the last thing that we'll be able to do concerning the revisions. I can see Susan Ngumo says things. So I can see Saum says case study. So I can see Lindsay here says, explain how utilitarian approach helps to eliminate corruption, So I think I'm going to be able to post that particular answer on the group. You'll be able to see it, Lindsay. So here you are talking about, in this case, for example, having to ensure what you're calling happiness within the organization. So you can be able to open doors for maybe whistleblowing, strengthening, for example, the frameworks, or for example, the rules and regulations within the organization, enhancing what you're calling whistleblowing, ensuring there's what you're calling transparency and actually accountability. So whistleblower protection, enhancing education and basically awareness. So efficient and use of, for example, in this case, effective ways or maybe processes or maybe technology within the organization to avoid any kind of loopholes that can be able to lead to what you're calling what may be corruption within the organization. So I'll be able to share the answer on the group discussion, Lindsay. Cooperation, incentivizing those who are basically maybe carrying out themselves ethically within the organization. You have to motivate them, always monitor the process or maybe procedures you've been able to put in place, whether they can be able to eliminate what you're calling corruption, so such kind of things. So if there's no any other concern, then I think we can be able to end there. And I think we'll be able to catch up in our next revision. So hopefully maybe tomorrow, we'll be able to have another revision around 9:30. So thank you very much for having joined the session. So we'll meet some other time.